Go. Good morning, everybody. We are recording. This is office hours for the Uke Club on Wednesday, March the 9th. And welcome to those that are here with me. I appreciate it when you can show up. Remember, the goal of these is to provide an opportunity for you to ask questions or interact with me directly. That's one advantage of the technology that we have, but we are recording and we have onlookers from all around the world. So, as you know, these sessions are always open to anything that's going on for members of the Uke Club. But I always try to plan a little something so there's some value automatically built in, and we don't have to sit around and wait for your lazy questions to roll through. So what I thought I would talk about today, we've been covering a lot of stuff about movable chords and a little bit of melody playing recently. And there's a basic element that we haven't really touched on there or really very much within the daily Uke Club lessons. And I think it's an invaluable skill, and I want to talk about it today. It's muting, left hand muting. When I say left hand, that's muting hand chording hand versus strumming hand. So I'm saying left hand because I'm a right-handed player. Obviously for you, if you're a lefty, that would be the opposite. Someday I want to do a survey and find out how many of our members are lefties. In my live classes, I usually get one in a group of, say, 15. I probably get one in two groups of 15. It's pretty rare. In my family, my mom and my sister are both left-handed and both took up guitar at some point and both chose to play what I call backwards. In my classes, I find that most lefties have chosen to play right-handed style, which to me just sounds impossible. All right, so here's what I want to talk about left hand muting. There's something that comes up. I'm going to twist this down a little bit so you can see better what's going on. There's something that comes up a lot on YouTube style ukulele lessons called chunking, where you run your strumming hand across the strings and cut the strings off. I don't do that very often, and it's not because I'm morally opposed to it in any way. It's just that for the way I prefer to play, it doesn't lend itself to flexibility the way that left hand muting does. I remember talking about chunking in one of our lessons for Stand By Me. So I'm doing a standard strum, but on that exaggerated beat, as I go down, I'm cutting off the strings. And that's what muting is in a nutshell. You're cutting off the vibration of the strings so that the sound is instantly cut off. It's like when a drummer hits a cymbal, smash, and it rings out. Or the drummer can hit the cymbal, smash, and he grabs it and instantly cuts it off. You hear that a lot in those 1920 songs. Boom, 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 boom. Although that sounds more like dub house music the way I'm doing it. So that's a right hand mute. Like that. And like I said, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that once you've gone down and muted the strings with your palm, there's nothing else you can do. Look where you are in relation to the strings. All you can really do is start over again. You can grab the up strum and do it again. So, like I said, nothing wrong with that. I just find it fairly limiting, and I can get most of that sound via a left-hand mute, and that provides me a lot more flexibility in the long run. Thanks, Todd. Glad this is a good topic for you. Cisse of Boston is here. Welcome. Now let's talk about the way I prefer to do it with a left-hand mute. I'm going to keep an eye on the clock. I'll either break this into 2 lessons or do it all today, kind of depending on the timing here. I'm going to show you first the more obvious way to do a left-hand mute. Then there's a second way, which I actually use more often, but it's a little more subtle and a little more tricky to explain and a little more tricky to get. So I'm going to save that for last. So this is kind of the brute force version of a left-hand mute, okay? So first of all, what are we talking about? When I say a left-hand mute, I'm going to grab a D7 chord. This works for any chord with some variation. But a D7 chord is good because you're covering all 4 strings, and it's very conspicuous that you're covering all 4 strings. So the idea of a mute is that in the same way that before I was muting with my right hand palm, now I'm going to mute the strings by releasing the pressure on the strings. You hear that? That plastic sound of my fingers running across the strings. That is the sound of the muted strings. We've talked about that in passing, at least, when I've recommended practicing that way. If you're working on strums, a great thing to do is just lay your fingers across the strings so you're not worrying about the chords. And then you can hear the sound of the strum itself rather than the music that you're creating. So you can focus on the rhythm. So we're doing the exact same thing. We're just doing it now with more precision. Eileen, that's who you are. Good. Glad to have you here, Eileen. So back to the D7 chord, covering all 4 strings. Here's a standard down strum, nail across the strings. And I hope you can hear that okay. The music just rings out until the sound naturally decays, until the vibration stops. Okay? So that's what you get most of the time when you play, probably without thinking. That ringing out sound. I will confess and say that that ringing out sound is what I want only probably 50% of the time. The rest of the time, I am doing some form of left-hand mute. Now, as I mentioned, this is kind of the broad version, whacking it with a big hammer of muting. You can completely cut off the chord all the time. You know what? Let me backtrack just a little bit. I'm going to give you 2 examples so you'll know what we're talking about, and then I'm going to demonstrate just one version of it for now. So the broad version is what I just showed you, where you've loosened your grip on the string so that you're still lightly touching the string, but you're getting a nothing but rhythm. All right, that's the broadest version of a left-hand mute, holding the chord shape, but holding with light pressure, so you're cutting off the strings completely. The other version, and which we're saving for later, but I just want you to know the difference, is where you strum the strings pressed down so music rings out, and then lightly release to cut off the notes. So here it is ringing out, and now I'll cut it off this time. You hear how it just stops. I hope with our internet connection and technology that you're able to hear and detect the differences that I'm talking about. All right, so now on to how to achieve this and the value of achieving it. So using the big broad version, where we're actually cutting off the notes and leaving them off, in other words, not using them, you can do what we basically did in practice session to create a rhythm. Now, believe it or not, I actually play that way in almost any song. There will be a moment of a measure where I want no music, where I just want rhythm. So I'm going to give you a big obvious example, which is Not Fade Away. I'm going to tell you how it's going to be. You're going to give your love to me. not fade away. Love is love and not fade away. You hear that rhythm? That's all about the strumming hand, but what really makes it sound musical, like a song, is the combination of the strumming hand with the left hand muting. If I wasn't doing left hand muting, it would still sound okay, but it wouldn't have the drive or the interest. You hear the difference? All right. Give me some hands or something so you at least let me know that you're following what I'm talking about so far. Any questions? Of course, you can type them into the chat area, and I'm happy to answer as we go or take questions at the end. All right. So that's the idea. We've got a rhythm going with the right hand, but we can exaggerate and provide more rhythm, which I guess is what exaggerate means, by doing this left hand muting. Absolutely, Jerry. It's the sound of that little riff is created by the left hand muting. I suppose you could do it through pure right hand technique, but why? So yeah, it's a very recognizable sound, and it's created this way. So let me talk it through a little bit more. This is kind of a complicated strum, so let me talk through the concepts before we go into that actual strum. The basic idea is that on any strum, you can do it in a full mute position. You want to be holding the chord. In this case, I'm holding a C major, second position, because again, I want to be covering all four strings so that when I do the mute, it affects all four strings. If I play a first position C, there's 3 strings that won't be muted. There's a way around that, but we won't talk about that for now. So anyway, C, let's just do a basic down up strum. Now within that, you have the choice. Any one of those 8 counts, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, can be played, let's call it in down position. Down meaning I'm pressing down on the strings and getting music. Down, up, down, up. Any one of those 8 counts could be played in the up position, meaning I'm up enough to mute the strings. And 2 and 3 and 4 and. So the key is to realize that they're the same 8 counts and that any of them can be muted or not muted. They could be played down or up. Let's give a couple of simple examples. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the beginning of a Cars song. Oh, it's completely and where does it go? I don't mind you coming here and wasting all my time. So let's go back to our strum. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Just the ups. So what's happening with this hand? Sorry, that was kind of a long example. This hand is kind of pulsing up and down on the strings in a case like that. I don't know, it may be too minute. I can see the dust on my ukulele, but I can't see my fingers moving. But in an exaggerated form, I'm pulsing up and down on the strings to keep the rhythm with what I'm playing. Down, down, up. All right, so that's how you can use it on just for a 4-count simple strum. Does that make sense? I hope so. And it's no different to do it for something like the not fade away. It's just you got to have the sound in your mind. Da 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 da. So I keep the strumming hand going for almost all of that. Da, 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 da. What I'm doing that's a little different than before is I'm putting the emphasis on the beats. You can hear the shave and a haircut, 2 bits. It's roughly that. All right, so you can sort of start to detect the sound of the not fade away riff in there. But what brings it in is I'm only going to press down on the ones that I want to hear, and I'm only going to want to hear the ones that I'm emphasizing in the strum, and the only ones that I'm emphasizing in the strum are the shave and a haircut 2-bit sound. But I'm keeping my strumming hand going. Okay, that's this. I'm going to get it going, then I'm going to say it, and then I'm going to play it. Da, 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 da. So you see how you can build from one knowledge element to the next and create exactly the sound that you want. People always ask, what's the strum pattern? What's the strum pattern? Well, the strum pattern, in my experience, rarely varies very much. Obviously, it varies some with different styles and speeds of songs. But what happens more is that you create a new sound within some usually pretty basic strum patterns by adding in some left-hand muting that excludes some, most, or all of the music beats from ringing out, leaving you as kind of the drummer and the rhythm guitarist at the same time. So I'm going to save version 2 of left-hand muting for our next time, because we're at 10:20 on the clock. I hear the specially wound rooster crowing out 10:20. So I'm going to leave it right there. I hope that was a clear explanation of kind of a deep concept, but I'm happy to leave things open for a couple minutes here and see what's going on. Jerry says this augments the universal strum, and it absolutely does. That's exactly it. The universal strum dictates that your hand motion is constant, down, up, down, up, down, up. And, you know, with very few exceptions, that is true. That's why I call it the universal strum. So here you're creating some variations on the universal strum. You create some variations with your right hand by when do you hit the strings, but you can simulate all those patterns that you would do with the right hand with the left hand. And if you keep the right hand moving, you're going to have more rhythm. Sometimes you don't want that rhythm, you know, for a slow song. Not that it's a slow song necessarily, but you want that open sound of a, you know, like an Eagle song. You want some space in there. And by doing it with the left hand mute, you'd fill up the space with a click over the muted strings, and that may not be what you want. But on the other hand, you know, for something like 5'2", Eyes of Blue, which we talked about a couple of weeks ago, let me get it going here in C. You hear how much muting is in there? I don't want those spaces to be open. I want them to be filled with as much rhythm as possible. I want to get people out on the dance floor. Please explain the harmonic change in that pattern, asked Todd. Are you just adding a touch of... Do you mean when I was doing this, Todd, I went from a C to an F, C to a B flat. Is that what you're asking about? If so, that's the answer. Going down 2 frets. No, you moved your hand, stayed in C. Oh, I think what I did here to get to the C to F, Todd, was I just dropped down my finger to close off strings, those 3 strings. That finger stays in place. So we talked about this actually a couple of weeks ago, this idea that you can find the 1, 4, 5 through this kind of mechanical process. So here's my, sorry, I'm going out of focus there. That's what we musicians say, you know, when something is just way out. I'm totally going out of focus, man. So I've got my C shape, which is the B flat position moved up. And then the F shape that I'm going for is at the 5th fret. And it's the D shape moved up. So to achieve that, it's a simple process once you've practiced it 1,000 times to shift from the C and just drop down to bar across to turn it into an F. It's like magic. So yeah, Todd, I am barring across 2, 3, and 4. And if I'm playing efficiently, I'm still getting the C note on string 1 to ring out the way a well-structured D-shaped chord should be. But I also don't mind if that's muted, as you know. You know, that's a doubled up note, so we can lose it. So what that means is you can do that full 1, 4, 5 just sort of through pure mechanics. You could do it in any key without understanding it. Just do the same shapes. We're here. So I hope you guys can hear this okay. I'm just getting over a head cold and everything sounds muffled and far, far away to me. So good. Let's see. Good, Jerry. I'm glad that's helpful. That's an excellent comment, and I appreciate it. So I appreciate you guys showing up. It looks like we had a few stragglers stray in. Pam's here. Glad to have you, Pam. And Wes made it too. Good. So I'm going to wrap it up right there. I'm just going to turn off the recording now. I'll hang around for a minute just in case there's any last-minute discussion that needs to take place off camera. I always like to say that while I'm on camera because it makes the people who are watching the replay really feel like they're missing out on something. So thanks for tuning in, everybody. I'm going to hit pause.